I have an exciting guest for us, Christopher McHenry, who is currently our VP of Product Management. Chris has been in the networking field now for many years. I'm actually not sure how many years now, Chris.
Close to 20. We're getting there. We're getting there.
20 years. Yeah, same here. I'm at the 20-year mark. You started your career at Cisco, so you've had a lot of experience with customers. I know you understand a lot of their challenges with regards to where do you actually populate your workloads and where should workloads be, and then that led you to coming to Aviatrix. I believe you started here as a senior SE like myself.
Yeah, it's funny, right? Because I wanted to get over here with like whatever role I could get. As I was at Cisco and I was leading this global team for data center networking software, and one of the pieces of software that was in my portfolio was a product that was focused on orchestrating cloud networking. And I was like, oh man, I've been through this 3 or 4 times because I'd been doing these startups inside of Cisco. Been through this 3 or 4 times, and I was like, this thing is not going to work here, but this is a real problem and somebody's going to solve it. What company is doing cloud networking right? I'm going to go get over there however I can. Found Aviatrix. I was like, whatever job there is, like I know I'm a good SE, like I'll go over and do an SE. Led an SE team, and then led our security solutions, and now I lead the whole product. So it's been a ride, but I will say people ask me how did you see yourself getting into this role? And I mean, the honest answer is I just wanted to be a part of this movement, but I have always been super passionate about building products. One of my career goals for a while was I'm kind of there to some extent, right? Was to get into like a CTO, CPO style position. So worked out, but I would have been happy to be here just along for the ride, man. Cause this thing, I think it's such a huge opportunity.
And of course, your progress throughout your career, understanding, being able to meet the customer where they're at and help build that product, help build the product set and make the best customer experience is incredible.
Yeah, that really is my focus. One of my core tenets, and I tell my team this pretty frequently, is great products are built with a deep empathy for the customer. One of the interesting parts about my career is that I've only ever been an amateur practitioner. I started out on the vendor side. And what was interesting about that was I always felt like the empathy is just super, super critical. And you have to, if you haven't done it before, that means you have to be like an amazing listener. You have to listen like very deeply to some of the emotional elements of things where you can pick up on, man, this is really hard for me. Like, here's the things that I don't like. Here's the things that I want to do better. Here's the things that are painful. And I bring that kind of muscle that I developed early in my career of listening to customers to this role, because, at the end of the day, my goal is to make the lives of the people who use our software easier. And sometimes we get lost in the tech and the coolness of the tech, but ultimately it's about how do we let you go home at 5:00.
Yeah, me coming from an operational role and then going into a more sales focused role, it's easy for me to have empathy towards customers, right? Because I've been in their shoes. I understand what they're going through. I understand when something breaks and they're, on something until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. It's one of the worst feelings you can have. So sometimes I think it might be a little easier if you haven't been in those shoes, like how you've grown up through the industry, and being able to be a better listener sometimes, because immediately when I talk to customers, like, oh yeah, I've had that happen too. And then next thing you know, it's a discussion rather than just listening. So yeah, definitely. So in previous episodes, we've definitely beaten the VMware Broadcom acquisition. So we're not going to touch on that today. I think everybody's kind of sick of hearing about that. And we've hit that a bunch, but one of the ones that constantly comes up, things that I talk to customers about, I'm sure you're talking to customers about, is AI, ML, and what is happening in the industry. There are people on one side that say, it's going to be like the .com bubble. We're on the arc going up and all of a sudden that arc's going to fall off. Others look at it as a long-term solution for a lot of different problems. So really trying to figure out what your take is on that, and how you see Aviatrix maybe leveraging AI, ML in the future as the product matures.
Yeah, so I think you nailed it in two ways, right? Both are important for us. When I think about the market and the part of the network that we serve, because the funny thing about networking is that it's the one thing that will never be contained to a single cloud. You can have storage in one cloud, you can have compute in one cloud, you can have apps that are entirely in one cloud, but the network will never be contained to one cloud, right? Like it will interface with other networks. It is this thing that, by the nature of what it does, is it is the thing that connects everything together. So you don't really contain it into physical spaces. And so anytime we see disruption in the way that applications are being created, that creates complexity for the network. And AI is absolutely one of those disruptors. I love watching the market. I think that it's really important, the whole Wayne Gretzky skate to where the puck is going kind of thing. I love watching the market, whether it affects us directly or not. And AI has certainly been disruptive in many, many, many ways. Now, as it comes to the dot-com bubble, I think, there has been an insane amount of money pumped into AI, venture capital, as well as, all sorts of investments. The Microsoft, obviously, and OpenAI has raised a ton of money. And so in terms of like bursting from a financial perspective, I don't know, right? Like all of these companies are not going to make it, right? And so I think there's some truth in that. But the other thing about the dot-com bubble that's interesting is, man, it really did transform our lives. People jumped on the bandwagon. They didn't know what to do with it yet, right? And when you didn't really know how to handle the internet, some of the ideas were good and some of the ideas were bad. But nobody today would say that the internet is not an integral part of their lives. I gotta say, I think AI is going to be that transformational. And the one thing I'll point to is the fact that I use it every day. And over the course of the last, year and a half, 2 years almost, of really playing around with ChatGPT and then kind of evolving it from the thing that I get to write my kids' bedtime stories to the thing that helps me brainstorm for like blog ideas and all this other kind of stuff. We've honed in on how to use it. It's like this skill, kind of like you hone in on how to use Google, in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that became a skill. You figured out why it was useful, and then it becomes transformational. And I'll tell you, once you know how the tool works, then there's some really, really cool things you can do with it. And I'll give some insight into how we are taking that into the product, because I kind of think about natural language as an incredible user experience tool. Now, I'm not a huge fan of chatbots. I think there's as the interface by itself, but one of my favorite implementations actually of AI is in like natural language search. So going in and being able to, rather than filling out a query. So if I want to go in, as an example, to Aviatrix, and I want to search for a network transaction or a firewall log or something along those lines, like pre-natural language, you got to go in and you got to say, oh, well, here, I want this and this and this, and select the drop down and do all this other kind of stuff. Man, that'd be great to just write out in a phrase, and all of a sudden you get exactly what you're looking for.
Yeah, almost creating that search engine type feel.
Yeah, right.
That Google's and others have.
Yeah, so I mean, you will see us in the next couple months launch several different LLM-driven features to help improve user experience. I'm not into AI washing. We've done a lot of really interesting research on like what is going to be useful, what's not going to be useful. We've looked at places where there's some really interesting emergent behavior. One of the things about networking is it always integrates with other networks too. And so the context that already exists in the LLM about, connecting to a Palo Alto firewall as an example, right? We can get more insight in the Aviatrix UI around those third-party connections. Lots of really cool stuff that I think is possible, but you'll see us start to launch some of those features later this year. So in the context of how it's transformational in the industry, like I think that's absolutely going to happen, and you'll see us start to integrate it. But especially in the context of ChatGPT and LLM-oriented workflows, I think a lot of it is how do you augment a process? How do you augment a user experience to make it a lot easier for a customer to do something that might have taken 50 clicks beforehand, but they can type their intent out and then get it to do something. Yeah. Now, in terms of industry and how Aviatrix networking, we've also seen this be transformative. And One of the things that I think this is going to be a huge driver of, and already has been, is multicloud, right? So, I mean, if you were in AWS or in GCP or in Azure today, the next battleground in terms of, application dominance is absolutely in this AI space. And it's moving so rapidly that customers they're having to make decisions around who they're going to invest in. And it's one of those decisions where you kind of want to choose the right product, not necessarily the convenient one. And that drives decisions that might pull people out of single clouds. There's also specialty clouds that are popping up, because guess what? You build data centers differently when they're built with GPUs instead of CPUs. Like, the power requirements are different. Last week, Microsoft announced that they were buying the entirety of the power from 3 Mile Island, which is freaking insane, right?
Yeah.
So, like, if you don't think this is going to be transformational for cloud, it is going to be transformational. And so our mission to allow customers to be independent from their cloud providers and at one of those core layers of the stack, the networking and network security layer, we are ready to take that on, right? We are ready to help enable customers to use the best products in the right clouds, and in the hybrid cloud too. Like, that might be looking at, deploying workloads in a colo provider, or centralizing some of your data assets so that they can be accessed across multiple different clouds. Equinix has been doing some really, really interesting stuff in that space. And we announced a partnership with Equinix last year. We've got some new, really exciting Equinix features coming out in the next couple of weeks. Equinix, Megaport, another big partner of ours, same kind of thing, right? We're ready, man. We're ready for it on both sides.
Yeah, I was watching an interview with Doug Merritt, our current CEO, and I know he's been on the podcast recently with Woody. He was mentioning it's really about the thoughtfulness of the platform that you choose, and then obviously accessing that data can be incredibly difficult based on where that is. And I've talked about this before, about data gravity, and the fact that the ability to be able to access the LLM or your data that is typically proprietary, very important, needs to be secure. Talk to me a little bit about how we're helping customers handle the challenges that they're going to be faced with where that data is going to be living, and how they're going to actually consume that data.
Yeah, I mean, connecting the LLMs or really whatever application you have to the data gravity is challenging. And so oftentimes when you're talking about moving around high volumes of data, having that data secured with encryption in transit, having that data accessible with low latency, all of those kinds of things are really, really important for what ultimately happens, which is a good user experience with the application. There's implications around cost as well. Data transfer cost is non-trivial, especially once you get your data into the cloud. It's like Hotel California. And so finding ways to use the network to optimize those flows and have the right partners in place to optimize cost and performance, and have that flexibility. And the network plays a really, really important role here. It's a combo, right? I mean, one of the things that's really interesting is I do see security as being one of the most common drivers and one of the biggest values that we deliver with our platform. If you think about what it takes to connect two things together today, I can throw them on the internet and the magic network will take care of it, right? But where it starts to get really complicated is when you want to secure it. You want it to be private. You want it to be behind a firewall. You want it to be observable. You want it to be segmented. You want to implement zero trust. You want to do all of these kinds of things. Get it off of the internet, right? One of my biggest pet peeves in language that has happened over the last 5 or 6 years with work from home and with the migration to cloud has been this word deperimeterization. It feels like this giving up, right? It says, oh my gosh, we lost the 4 physical walls of our office, and now I don't have a perimeter anymore, and I don't know what I'm going to do with security. So we're going to deploy agents, and we're going to do volume scanning for vulnerabilities, which doesn't actually stop anything. It just tells you what software. It's like a software inventory, right? Lots of false positives. It's a tough technique, right? Vulnerability scanning was never our number one security investment. But deperimeterization as a term makes people feel like you can't control, the perimeter of your environment. I think that's totally false. I actually think that it's a lack of innovation, especially in the cloud side, right? So we've seen customers regain control of their perimeter for users with SSE solutions and with SASE solutions. We have seen customers regain control of their ingress application perimeter with hosted WAF like Cloudflare and Akamai and some amazing security services that allow you to put a front door in front of your application. It used to be a physical load balancer and an F5 that you sat on-prem. Now it's this cloud service. Where we have not seen innovation is in the app-to-app security, right? So the things that are living in the cloud or application egress. Egress, you'll hear me talk about it all the time. It's something I'm just outrageously passionate about because it's the freaking perimeter. It's one of the most important control points that you have in your network. And I see so many environments that don't have it. And, one of the things that just is really top of mind for a lot of people right now is this change that Azure's making in terms of...
Yeah, I was just would say a perfect pivot point.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Driving into Azure and the big changes that are coming in 2025 for them and egress, because today customers are able to take advantage of just straight out egress from any of their
by
VNets.
default, right? Like it's magic.
Correct.
And it's because the primary consumer of cloud was originally developers, and developers they didn't want any friction for the developers to be able to consume other services that they were offering. So I use S3 as an example, but Azure's got all the comparable services too, right? You have an application that you deploy in AWS. I want to consume S3. I want to consume Kinesis. I want to consume Bedrock. All of those are internet connected services, right? So we have to make it easy for you to access the internet as a developer. And therefore we get default outbound access, right?
Yes.
Now in AWS, you have to deploy an IGW and a NAT gateway, or if you put it in a public subnet and give it a public IP. In Azure, it just kind of works, right?
Yep.
And they're changing that. I think it's interesting. There's probably a couple reasons, but when you look at the announcement that they made, so this is September of next year, they won't allow new workloads to be deployed that have default outbound internet access. So you're going to have to go in and add NAT gateways. What's funny to me is that they talk about it as that's like, hey, we're going to improve security. You now have to add a NAT gateway. I'm like, I didn't do anything, right? Like you already had a NAT gateway. There was just this implicit NAT that was happening underneath the covers, right? Now it's explicit.
All your workloads can access anything they need to access.
Yes. You have no visibility.
Anything, right?
No control, right? And what's really problematic too is a lot of customers are in a bit of a tough spot here because it's a breaking change. It could be a breaking change for many customers. The other challenge is you probably don't just want to do NAT. Like you probably want to take this as an opportunity to implement security. And there are a lot of things that traditional firewalls are not good at in these scenarios. One of the things that I think is really interesting about the cloud is this concept of, I call them island VPCs. You could call them disconnected VPCs or VNets. You could call them, isolated VPCs or VNets, but they're these, network containers that you didn't connect to the corporate network. In some respects, that's a good security posture, right? Like, if it's not connected, we don't have the ability to have lateral movement. But the other problem with that is, oftentimes when those happen, you use the same default IP addressing space. And so you might have 50 VPCs that are all 10/8, which means you're never going to be able to connect that thing to your corporate network, right? And
Exactly.
And so we were very thoughtful when we built Distributed Cloud Firewall to make sure that we can address those kinds of situations as well. And we're doing some additional enhancements to the workflow around enabling NAT and enabling egress security in the product to simplify those workflows in Azure, in addition to AWS. I really think, one of the things that I will be the most excited about when we look back on Aviatrix and the impact that we have, long-term in the environment is I think we have a chance to fundamentally make a difference in the security posture of cloud workloads by regaining control of the perimeter and getting that deperimeterization word out of our heads and think about, no, it's not an impossible problem to solve. It's just you need an architecture that was designed for the cloud. And so super, super excited. You'll see a lot more content, collateral, and enablement on cloud perimeter security, which is the use case that we're talking about. So get deperimeterization out, regain control of your cloud perimeter. And I think this change in Azure is a perfect opportunity for organizations to reassess how they're doing cloud perimeter security, cloud egress firewalling. We have a really, really amazing product to help support that.
Yeah, well, shameless plug for Aviatrix as we're talking right now. But I think we create the easy button for not total zero trust, but a zero trust type model, right? The ability to eliminate access to things that are detrimental to your environment and will become a problem if workloads are reaching out to those places.
Yeah. I mean, that zero trust is a whole topic as well. I mean, I think it's a huge transition in the way that customers think about network security. But even in that space, right? One of the biggest pieces of advice that I have for people is you still got to prioritize, right? You are in zero trust transitioning a problem. So the problem without zero trust is that you're trying to detect threats, which is like a needle in the haystack. It's really, really hard. But when you transition to zero trust, you get way better at determining what's bad because you're allowing what's good. But you transition it to a policy problem, which is, I don't know. At the day zero, it's like, I don't know what my zero trust policy should be.
Yes.
So how do you discover it? And then the practicality of it is, over time, you're probably managing more policies than you had beforehand. Like, you used to have one policy that was just block bad stuff. And now you've got something that's a little bit more, needs to be integrated with infrastructure as code. And so I see a lot of organizations get paralyzed when they have zero trust initiatives about where to start.
Yes.
And they talk about it in the sense of, like, we want perfection. He's like, no, I've never seen an IT project executed to perfection. So they like anything, perfection is the enemy of good. And we want to make progress in improving our security posture. So thinking about how to start, thinking about some of those highly critical workloads, the things that hold your sensitive data, thinking about some of the critical access points in your network, right? Your partner DMZs, right? The places where partners are connecting in, the places where you might have data exfil. This is a controversial opinion, but one of the services that's super popular in the cloud is this private endpoint, private link service. I get it. It's a way to connect to services without having to have internet access. But to me, it's kind of like a backdoor in the network in many cases, right? You got to be real careful with that stuff, because it's if I put a private endpoint out to S3, like, that is a perfect unmonitored data exfil path.
You're increasing your blast radius.
You're increasing blast radius. You are increasing the ingress and egress. Really, in those scenarios, typically the egress points in the network. Policy control points, right? So, like, you definitely need to have policy. But moral of the story is, like, think about it. Any of those places where you are connecting outside of your organization, could be out to the internet, could be, via private link or to a third-party service, could be to a partner, right, with connectivity. Those are the places to start, right? Like, if you don't have visibility, you don't have control, that's your perimeter, right? Like, we always had firewalls on-prem. We don't in the cloud, right? So it's, if you don't have a handle on those, start there and then move further, right? Then we can move into microsegmentation. Then we can move into granular east-west security. Then we can kind of expand the strategy from a zero trust perspective. But biggest piece of advice, break the problem down, focus on the places that are going to have the biggest impact. And I'm a huge believer in helping customers accelerate their journey towards zero trust. We got a lot to offer there, I can be a little bit maybe more Aviatrix centric because my job is the product. But yes, exactly, lots of opportunity for improvement in that space, and my goal is to have an impact there.
So coming up, running into 2025 and beyond, where is Aviatrix going? And how do you see the industry rolling in to what Aviatrix is going to be able to provide?
Yeah, so I won't spoil some of the stuff because we got several big announcements planned for the conference sprint at the end of this year. We are going to be back at Azure's Ignite conference, which I'm super excited about. We are obviously going to be at reInvent as well. So we'll pause because there's some big stuff coming. Come back. Maybe we can chat again in December. But more broadly, what I'll say is I think a few areas are going to be really interesting for organizations over the next 6 to 12 months. I think multi-cloud and hybrid cloud are going to be very top of mind. I am seeing, and this has been in the news this week as well, I am seeing a lot more customers saying that their steady state is going to be hybrid. Yes, if you rewind 2 years ago, it was, I'm closing my data centers in 2 years. And I think the term cloud smart has become much more interesting. So how can Aviatrix better serve the hybrid cloud? And not to, you guys said you'd beat a dead horse on the Broadcom VMware acquisition, but I think in the hybrid cloud environment, some of that is going to be, colo space. Some of that is going to be gear that organizations, manage, maybe outsourced bare metal stuff. I mean, there's a lot of different varieties of what it could ultimately look like. But I do think it's not going to look quite the same. It's not going to be 95% VMware like it was before cloud really took off. And just like in the cloud, there needs to be these standardized foundational layers of the stack that hopefully give you some agility, similar constructs, consistency to the things that were great about cloud, that are great about cloud, right? The speed, the programmability, the integrated security, all of those kinds of things. So we are investing a lot in how Aviatrix can provide the core networking layer, that foundational networking layer for building VPCs and colos, as an example. And you'll see the first phase of that in our next release, which is coming out in about 3 weeks. So I don't know when this will get published. So mid-October, right? We're announcing a new feature where you can run transit on the full Aviatrix transit, region-to-region connectivity, building out spoke VPCs, all that kind of stuff in colo providers, on VMware, on Equinix Network Edge, on Megaport Virtual Edge, right? So we can start to actually build some of these cloud networking structures in places that aren't the traditional hyperscaler CSPs. So that, I think, and continued really interesting investments there so that customers can, have consistency in that foundational layer of stack with networking and network security.
Yeah, I think it's great because it gives customers the flexibility to run their data across paths that they specifically want to run data across, right? Whether they choose to use the backbone of the CSP, which is, they have incredible backbones. They've built out these incredible networks. So the ability to use their backbones is great. But in some cases and in some instances, customers really like to use the speed and agility of an Equinix backbone, and giving them the option of where they want to actually move their data across is incredible.
Yeah, could not agree more, right? I mean, it's one of the aha moments that I had a year or so ago when we greenlit some of the features that we're shipping now, was that it's just that there are emerging cloud providers that are specialty clouds, Equinix, Megaport, specialty networking clouds. You can look at some of the AI clouds like Lambda and, even some of the ones that have converted from Bitcoin mining to the Bitcoin mining on their GPU farms to AI on their GPU farms. But the sovereign clouds in Europe, right? The cloud landscape the hybrid cloud landscape is going to diversify. Hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, whatever you want to call it. And allowing organizations, whether that's choosing the best networking path or whether that's connecting to the best application environment, is critically important. And so continued investment there. And then I am a huge believer that networking and network security are converging. They have been for a long time.
Yes.
I think the SASE market is a perfect example of that, right? Like SD-WAN and SSE, it is networking and security in a single thing, right?
Yes. I can agree with you more.
And you go look at, was at RSA earlier this year, walking down the booths, all the firewall vendor, Fortinet, Cisco, right next to each other. Both of them literally had the words converging networking and network security in their booths, right? So continued investment from us in making sure that the network has the intelligence to implement simple, intent-based, threat-smart, zero-trust security, right? All the things that you need to do from a network security perspective. Network security is one of the fundamental controls. There's really only like two things that can stop an active breach. It is endpoint security and network security. They are active controls. Maybe you throw AAA on there. Identity, that AAA is really important too.
Yep.
Those are active controls. It's not vuln scanning. It's not even EDR, XDR. It's not SIM. Those are all like, how do I find it fast enough once it's already been breached? The things that stop attacks are network security, endpoint security, AAA, IAM, right?
Yep.
And so having the network be able to implement security, it can be transformative because we have gotten away from that in the cloud. And so continued investment from us there. Now, lastly, critically important, I said the network enhancing security. So we are also constantly innovating in the networking space. We got some really, really interesting stuff in the pipeline that we're working on. I'm kind of transforming the way that networks look merely over the next 12 to 24 months. But yeah, not standing still in any of those areas. It's going to be a really exciting year.
Awesome. Chris, I know we can talk about this all day. I want to thank you for your time today. I really appreciate you coming on and giving us some insight around what's happening with Aviatrix and what we're thinking. And we'll definitely have you back once we make some of these announcements going forward. I look forward to having you come back on.
Yeah, my pleasure, Jason. Good to see you, man.
Outstanding. Thank you so much.